On July 22, 2015, a laboratory technician picked up the phone and read a number out loud that did not sound like science. It sounded like the end of 18 years of silence. 1 in 293 sexillion. That was the probability that the blood preserved on a cracked bedroom windowsill since 1997 belonged to anyone other than the man who had been living 2 doors down the entire time. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back 18 years, to a quiet street in Midwest City, Oklahoma, to a small duplex on Jet Drive, to a bedroom shared by 2 little sisters, and to a night that began exactly like every other night until it didn't. This is a true crime documentary about Kirsten Renee Hatfield. This is Ripple Effect Stories. Kirsten Renee Hatfield was born on February 12, 1989, in Midwest City, Oklahoma. She came into the world with strawberry blonde curls and eyes so alert and bright that her mother Shannon said they never missed anything. Her father left shortly after she was born, and so from the very beginning, it was just Shannon and Kirsten, and then later, a baby sister named Faith. Kirsten was the kind of child that teachers remembered long after she moved on to the next grade. Quiet but sharp, polite but curious, she did not demand attention. She earned it simply by being present, by being the kind of person who noticed what others needed before they had to ask. Neighbors on Jet Drive remembered her as shy and sweet. She loved books. She would disappear into stories for hours, completely unreachable, transported somewhere only she could see. And her favorite game, the one that tells you everything about the person she was going to become, was playing teacher. She used a cardboard box as a blackboard. She lined up her stuffed animals and her 3-year-old sister Faith as her students, and ran that classroom with a seriousness that made the adults in her life smile. Kirsten was 5 years older than Faith and acted in the best possible way like she was 20. She braided Faith's hair. She sang to her at night. She was already shaping her future, and that future belonged entirely to her. By the spring of 1997, life on Jet Drive was quiet but heavy. Shannon was raising both girls alone in a small duplex. Money was tight and the walls were thin, but the bond between those 2 sisters was not something the walls could contain. On the evening of May 13, 1997, nothing felt different. Shannon put both girls to bed around 11:30. She kissed them goodnight and pulled the bedroom door almost closed, not all the way, just a crack. She always left it slightly open. That way, if one of the girls woke up frightened, they could see the hallway light peeking through. It was a small habit, the kind every mother builds without thinking. Shannon went to her room and fell asleep. And on that quiet, ordinary night on Jet Drive, everything that came next was the last thing anyone could have imagined. At around 3 in the morning, Shannon woke up. She could not explain why. There was a sound, faint, unclear, the kind that pulls you out of sleep before your brain can name it. She got up and walked to the girls' room, and she noticed something small, something that did not feel alarming in that moment but would haunt her for the rest of her life. The door was completely closed. She always left it open, but she was half asleep and thought maybe one of the girls had shut it. She pushed it open slightly. The room was dark. Faith was in her bed. Everything looked still. She did not turn on the light. She did not step inside. She went back to bed. That decision, that single, ordinary, completely reasonable decision, meant that Kirsten had already been gone for at least 30 minutes, and Shannon had been standing 2 feet from an empty bed without knowing it. At 6:30 in the morning, Shannon went to wake her daughters. Faith was there, still asleep. Kirsten's bed was empty, not thrown around, not messy, just empty, like she had simply ceased to exist. Shannon searched every room, every closet, then outside. She called Kirsten's grandfather. She called every number she had. Each call came back the same. No, she is not here. That was when she called 911. Officers arrived quickly, and within minutes the tone of that scene shifted permanently, because what they found in that bedroom was not the scene of a child who had slipped out on her own. The bedroom window was cracked open. The screen had been removed from the outside. On the windowsill, smears of blood, not a lot, but enough to stop every officer in that room cold. Outside in the backyard, just feet from the house, investigators found discarded clothing stained with blood, a clear sign that a struggle had taken place just beyond that window. The entry was too clean. No forced locks, no broken wood, no kicked doors. Whoever climbed through that window did not stumble in. They knew exactly which room to enter. They knew exactly which bed Kirsten slept in. And they got her out without making a single sound, while a 3-year-old slept 2 feet away. Investigators brought in a child psychologist to speak with Faith. They handled her gently, carefully, spending hours trying to piece together what a 3-year-old mind had held from that night. What Faith gave them was the only eyewitness account this Oklahoma cold case would ever have. 6 words. A bad man took my sister. No description, no name, just the truth delivered in the most heartbreaking way imaginable. The blood on the windowsill and on Kirsten's underwear was sent to the lab. Results came back with something critical. The blood did not belong to Kirsten. It belonged to an unknown male. The attacker had cut himself climbing through that window. He had left his own DNA at the scene, a mistake so small he probably never even felt it. Investigators had his DNA. They just did not have his name. Not yet. But here is what nobody knew that morning. While helicopters swept overhead, while search dogs covered every alley and storm drain, while Shannon stood in her front yard shaking, the shadow that had entered that room was not hiding somewhere far away. It had not fled the state. It had not vanished. It was watching, much closer than anyone could have imagined. Losing a child does not stop time. It freezes it. Shannon woke up every morning in the same house, walked past the same hallway, and looked at the same door that was now permanently closed, not cracked open, not slightly ajar, closed, because there was no one left to peek in on anymore. In the other bed, Faith was growing up, hitting milestones, learning to walk, then talk, then read. Every step she took was a quiet reminder of every step Kirsten would never take. Shannon was raising one daughter in the shadow of the other, and the house was full of life and completely hollow at the same time. This is what the world does not tell you about unsolved murder cases. The family does not get to grieve and move on. They just grieve every single day on repeat. The morning Kirsten was reported missing, Midwest City responded with everything it had. Helicopters swept the sky. Search dogs worked every alley within a mile radius. Dive teams entered nearby creeks. Officers went door to door. The community showed up, strangers holding signs, walking alongside people they had never met. It felt urgent. It felt real. But inside that urgency, something damaging was already beginning. Police did what investigators always do when a child vanishes from inside her own home. They looked at the family first. Shannon had a history with drugs. She had admitted it openly, and in the eyes of some investigators, that history made her a suspect before she was ever a grieving mother. Family members were brought in for polygraph tests. Some failed not because they knew where Kirsten was, but because under the pressure of bright lights and hard questions, their own unrelated secrets leaked out. And to the investigators watching the needles move, a failed test was a failed test. The whispers started in the neighborhood. Shannon was negligent. Shannon knew something. Shannon had dangerous people around her children. The media hinted at it. And Shannon, who was already drowning, was handed one more weight to carry, the quiet, poisonous suggestion that she had somehow brought this on her own daughter. She passed every polygraph she was ever given. No evidence ever connected her to Kirsten's disappearance, but the shadow of suspicion never fully lifted. She refused to collapse under it. She built a volunteer center from nothing, flyers, phone lines, community vigils. She stood in front of cameras and begged for information. She knocked on doors herself, and then the people she trusted stole from her. Some of the volunteers pocketed donated money. Others lied about their hours and used Kirsten's face to chase media attention. Shannon found out slowly in pieces, each betrayal more exhausting than the last. She kept going anyway. Tip lines flooded the station. One call hit differently, a woman frightened of her boyfriend, who had mumbled Kirsten's name in his sleep. Police pulled his record and found prior assault charges and a pattern of violence. For a few hours, it felt like the walls were closing in on the right person. Then his alibi held. Surveillance footage confirmed it. He could not have been on Jet Drive that night. The lead collapsed in an afternoon. Shannon cried in her car outside the station, then drove home and kept going. But by the year 2000, so did almost everything else. The news moved on to newer tragedies. The flyers Shannon had posted across Midwest City began to yellow in the sun, edges curling, Kirsten's face slowly fading like a photograph left too long on a windowsill. Neighbors who had once held candles in the street quietly went back inside their lives. The case was officially classified as cold, and just like that, Kirsten's name became a file number on a lower shelf. Shannon was now fully alone in this, so she made a decision that most people would never have the strength to make. She went back to school. She earned a degree in forensics. Then she became a parole officer, not for the income, but for the access. Every violent offender being released back into society passed across her desk. She studied each file. She was convinced that whoever had taken Kirsten had done something like this before, that the system had already touched him and let him go. She spent years looking. She never found him that way. But the answer was sitting in an evidence box the entire time: Kirsten's underwear, the blood on the windowsill, sealed in plastic since 1997, untested and waiting. Not because investigators had given up, but because in 1997, the technology to read what that blood was saying simply did not exist yet. Our team puts everything into researching and building these true crime stories for you, every detail verified, every source checked twice. If this story means something to you, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss a case, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from. It genuinely means everything to us. Now back to Jet Drive, because the evidence had not changed, but the world had. When Detective Darrell Miller reopened Kirsten's case in June 2015, he did not need helicopters or search dogs. He needed a map of Jet Drive and 18 years of evidence that nobody had properly read. He pulled the original interview logs and began reading every name, every neighbor, every person questioned in those first frantic days of May 1997. And one name stopped him cold: Anthony Palma, age 56, address, Jet Drive, Midwest City, 2 houses south of the Hatfield home, same side of the street. He had been there in 1997. He had answered questions. He had seemed calm and cooperative, and then he had gone home, and he was still there, not across the city, not in another state. He had never left. For 18 years, while Shannon built a volunteer center and earned a forensics degree and read every criminal file she could access, Anthony Palma was living 2 doors down. While helicopters flew over his roof in 1997, he was inside. While Shannon stood in her front yard shaking, his house was visible from where she stood. He could see her from his window, and he never said a single word. To the people on Jet Drive, Palma was completely ordinary. Neighbors called him Uncle Tony. He fixed kids' bikes in his driveway without being asked. He kept his lawn immaculate. He gave food to hungry children in the neighborhood. He helped elderly neighbors move furniture. That image was not an accident. It was a construction, because the best place to hide is in plain sight, and the best disguise is kindness. In 1997, when police knocked on his door as part of their neighborhood canvass, Palma invited them inside. He was calm. He said he barely knew the Hatfield family. He mentioned hearing his dog bark around 3 in the morning but thought nothing of it. He cooperated fully. No red flags, no nervous behavior that investigators noted. They thanked him and moved on. They did not run his full background. That was the mistake that would take 18 years to correct. Because when Miller pulled Palma's full history in 2015, what he found was not the record of a quiet, helpful neighbor. It was the record of a predator with a practiced method. In 1979, years before Kirsten was even born, Palma had broken into a bedroom through a window in the middle of the night. The victim was an 8-year-old girl, same age. Same entry method, same silence. He was never charged. In 1982, he broke into a woman's home and attacked her. Her son intervened before the assault went further. Palma was convicted and sentenced to 5 years, released in 1986, 11 years before Kirsten disappeared. The system had him in its hands, and then it let him go. There was one more detail that Miller found deeply unsettling. Every year, around the anniversary of Kirsten's disappearance, Palma's wife said her husband became withdrawn, quiet. He would go dark for days. She had always assumed it was because the tragedy had happened so close to their home. She spent those quiet days of May beside him, comforting him, believing she was helping her husband process a neighbor's grief. She had no idea that while she sat next to him in those silent days every year, she was sitting next to the reason the anniversary existed. Miller now had a name and a pattern, but he needed DNA. The blood on the windowsill and on Kirsten's underwear had been preserved in an evidence box since 1997. In those early years, investigators had tried, but 1997 forensic science required large, pristine samples to extract a usable DNA profile. The technology simply could not do enough with what they had. By 2015, that had completely changed. Modern forensic science could pull a person's identity from a microscopic trace left on a cigarette butt, a syringe, or a beer bottle. Miller gathered everything from the original evidence list and submitted it all. Then he went to Palma's door and told him it was a routine cold case update, that the department was reaching out to people from the original investigation, collecting cheek swabs simply to eliminate them as suspects. Standard procedure, nothing alarming. Palmer agreed without hesitation. He opened his mouth. He let the cotton swab touch his cheek. He even smiled. After 18 years of watching this cold case go nowhere, after 18 years of living 2 doors down from the family he had destroyed, Anthony Palma believed he was completely untouchable. He thought the old blood on that windowsill was too degraded, too compromised, too far gone to tell anyone anything. He thought time had erased him. On July 22, 2015, Detective Miller's phone rang. It was the lab, and the technician on the other end was not reading results in a routine voice. The match probability was 1 in 293 sextillion, 293 followed by 21 zeros. There are an estimated 7.5 octillion grains of sand on every beach and desert on this entire planet, and the DNA match probability was still 40 times larger than that. It was not evidence. It was mathematical certainty. It meant that if you searched every human being who had ever lived on this earth since the beginning of recorded history, every person, every lifetime, every generation, you would still not find another individual whose blood could have been on that windowsill. Only Anthony Palma, only him, always only him. The 18-year-old lie was dead. In October 2015, investigators brought Palma in for what they described as a routine follow-up. He walked in without a lawyer, easy and rehearsed, selling them Uncle Tony for the better part of an hour. He described his years on Jet Drive, how he was always outside, always helping, how kids came to him with broken bikes. He said he barely knew the Hatfield family. He said they were practically strangers. Every sentence was a trap he was setting for himself. When asked what he thought had happened to Kirsten, Palma pointed directly at Shannon, her drug past, the dangerous people around her children, the negligence. He said it with the confidence of a man who had been rehearsing that answer for nearly 2 decades. Then Detective Miller placed the DNA report on the table. He did not raise his voice. He simply slid the paper across and let Palma read it. The color left Palma's face. That practiced, constructed calm cracked, not loudly, not with tears or shouting, but quietly, the way ice breaks under weight it was never meant to hold. Then Miller placed a photograph on the table. 8-year-old Kirsten Hatfield, strawberry blonde curls, bright eyes, the little girl who used a cardboard box as a blackboard to teach her baby sister. Palma looked at the table, at the wall, at his hands, anywhere that was not that photograph. Then slowly, deliberately, he reached out and pushed the picture away, not in anger, not in grief. He simply could not stand to have her face in his line of sight. An innocent man would have felt something looking at that photograph. Anthony Palma pushed it away because looking at her was unbearable. He was arrested on October 13, 2015, charged with kidnapping and first-degree murder. At trial in October 2017, with no body and no cause of death, the prosecution built their case on DNA and the testimony of 3 women from 3 separate decades, women who had never spoken to each other, never compared notes, never stood in the same room before that courtroom, each of whom described the exact same man, the exact same method, the exact same darkness wearing neighborly clothing. Not a man who made one terrible mistake, a predator who had been operating for decades, refining his method, learning from near misses, walking away clean every single time. The jury deliberated for 1 hour. Guilty of first-degree murder, life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the courtroom, Shannon Hazen put her hands over her face. Faith, now a grown woman, sat beside her mother and wept, but Shannon knew the truth. The verdict was justice. It was not closure. Kirsten was still out there somewhere. Her daughter had a conviction but not a grave, a sentence but not an answer. Shannon wrote Palma letters in prison, not angry letters, prayers. She told him she had forgiven him. She told him she wanted one thing, the location of her daughter's body, just a place to put flowers, just a piece of ground that meant something. He never wrote back. He asked her to stop sending letters. She sent more anyway. On January 11, 2019, Palma was found dead in his cell at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary, strangled by his cellmate, a man already serving life for triple murder. He was 59 years old. He died with no warning, no mercy, and no chance to prepare, the same conditions he had given others. Whatever he knew, he took it with him. The one interview investigators had been planning for later that year, the final attempt to ask him where Kirsten was buried, would never happen. Shannon's response was not what most people expected. She said she had forgiven Anthony Palma long before she ever knew his name. She was not celebrating his death. She was grieving it, because it closed a door she had been standing in front of for 22 years. She has since asked investigators to search the lake near where Palma used to work. She has asked that the search for Kirsten's remains not be quietly abandoned now that he is gone. She is still asking. She will not stop. And Palma's wife, the woman who spent every anniversary of Kirsten's disappearance, quietly comforting her husband through his dark, withdrawn days of May, believing she was helping him process a neighbor's tragedy. She spent those years unknowingly sitting beside the reason the anniversary existed. That ripple never stops spreading. Faith raises her own children now, with a fierceness that only loss can create. She never got to say goodbye to the sister who braided her hair and taught her lessons on a cardboard box blackboard. That is not something time fixes. That is something you carry. If Kirsten Hatfield were alive today, she would be 37 years old. She had direction. She had warmth. She had a future that belonged entirely to her, and nobody could take it from her, except for a shadow that lived 2 doors down. This case is a reminder that evil does not always arrive as a stranger. Sometimes it mows its lawn every Saturday morning, fixes the neighborhood kids' bikes, and watches the search helicopters fly overhead from behind its own living room window. If this story moved you, subscribe to Ripple Effect Stories. Every week, we uncover the cases where one moment changed everything. If you believe Anthony Palma harmed others whose stories have never come forward, leave your thoughts below. Shannon Hazen forgave the man who took her daughter before she even knew his name. Could you do the same in her position? And with Palma gone and Kirsten's body still missing, what do you think investigators should do next?